Hey everybody, in my hands here I have one of the newsmakers of the year. It is the Fujifilm GFX 50S medium format camera. 50 screaming megapixels, medium format sensor, size of a DSLR. And Fujifilm was nice enough to lend it to us for 24 hours ahead of the release. So I got Gary Goldberg over here, who's an incredible Fuji shooter. He's gonna do a portrait session with this camera, then I'm gonna steal it from him, and I'm gonna go out into the streets of Toronto and do some street and night photography with it to see how it holds up out in the real world, so to speak. Then we're gonna get back together and oh, I was so close. I was so close, right?
That was close.
Oh. And we're gonna get back together and we're gonna talk about our experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, and all the cool things that might make you wanna add this bad boy to your kit. So stick around, we're gonna have a whole lot of fun. All right, so give me first off your first impressions. When you first saw the camera, first got the camera in your hand, what were you thinking?
I was thinking, this is really cool. I've got a medium format camera and it's not much bigger than my mirrorless X-T2, which is amazing. Like it's compact size and it's got a 645 sensor in there, unbelievable, amazing.
And you're a Fuji shooter, so you're used to sort of like the Fuji ergonomics and design. Did it feel very familiar to you?
Yeah, it felt almost exactly the same. I was able to pick up all the nuances of the camera like right away, and the menu systems were pretty much very similar to the X-T2, so it felt comfortable to me, and I was able to start shooting with it almost immediately.
You know, I'll say this about Fuji, that for me, the first time I picked up a Fuji camera, and I thought, this is how you design a camera. And I think that what's really great about this camera is it's sort of like continuing that legacy.
Yeah. Ergonomically, it feels like all the dials and the buttons are in the right place, and that little joystick for me just makes the camera feel just terrific. Like you can just pretty much maneuver everything you need to with that little joystick, and it's in just the right spot for your thumb.
Yeah,
so
totally. And let's give people a sense of like what if you're unfamiliar with medium format, what you're actually looking at. So do you want to grab, like, take your lens off there just so we can show people sort of the difference in the sensor size. So that's an APS-C sensor?
This is an APS-C sensor.
So there's the APS-C sensor. It's a little bit smaller than 35 mil full frame, and now this is your medium format sensor size. So it's pretty massive. And that gives you...
got a great comparison to the body sizes right there too, so...
Exactly, and flip it this way just so you see the top view.
So similar.
Yeah, not that much bigger. So it's your, mirrorless medium format, pretty rad stuff. So let's talk about your portrait shoot. Set me up, tell me about what you're going for with your portrait shoot, and then sort of your experience with the camera.
Yeah, we just wanted to have some fun with the portrait shoot. We brought in a model, her name was Drew. I really wanted to show off the camera, like to see what the dynamic range was all about. So I figured rather than shooting with strobes, we used LED lighting so that we could shoot at a high ISO. And we were shooting between 1000 and 1600 ISO. And it was pretty amazing what we were able to pull out of this camera. Like, you wouldn't know that you're shooting at 1000 or 1600 ISO. Yeah. And the image quality was amazing. We were able to shoot tethered. I think the one big thing I noticed right off the bat was it has way more autofocus points than the X-T2. I think it was 425 autofocus points. Right. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah. So the focus is not phase detection, it's contrast, which means that it's presumably more accurate, but not as fast as a phase detection. How did you find autofocus reaction times and things like that?
The focusing for me was perfect. It was focusing very quickly. I like to shoot, when I'm shooting with a model or a person, I tend to focus on the person's eye. And that's usually what decides my framing. So I have to choose whether it's the eye that's closest to the camera or farthest away, I guess. But it was doing a pretty bang-on job of nailing the focus. for me.
I had a bit of a different experience. Now, what I chose to do was, because of the time limit, because we only had the camera for 24 hours, all I could really do that would complement what Gary was doing was to take the camera out into the streets of the city and shoot some night photography with it, which is not typically why you buy a medium format camera. It's not really what medium format cameras are designed for. They're more for like commercial work or for weddings, where you have a lot more control of the light. But it's kind of a fun experiment to see if it does work in those environments where you would typically take like more of a DSLR. And I found that focusing in low light was, as expected, was a lot more difficult. It wasn't hitting the mark as much as I was hoping it would. I will say this is probably something you're going to experience with a DSLR anyways. You know, it's always harder to focus in low light. There's no secret there. So whether the camera performs better or worse or the same as a DSLR in low light, it's kind of hard for me to tell, but it was certainly a struggle. And then I would turn off the autofocus and go into manual mode, and then there's focus peaking. Right. So I put it on low, so only the sharpest things illuminate. And there's a lot of throw on those lenses, like you're spinning it a lot to get it to kind of pull focus. And so that was just tricky for like night street photography. It felt like a little bit outside of its element. But that being said, that's probably a similar situation you're going to have with any DSLR. So I don't think it's necessarily indicative of the camera itself. It's just indicative of the environment. But I will say this. I rarely push the camera above 3200 ISO. With my previous experience with medium format, with some of the other leading brands of medium format, when I push it into ISOs to 800, 1600, I wasn't happy with the results. So I assumed that this is going to be sort of the same thing, maybe improved by like a stop or two in their ISO rating, because the base sensitivity of the camera is 100. So that should tell you like the base sensor is 100. Probably the further away you get from 100, it's not going to be as good. And because it was such low light, I really had to push into 3200. And on the back of the camera, it looks great, but the back of the camera can lie. And occasionally I pushed it to 6400, and one shot of 12,800 looked great on the back of the camera, but I was like, there's no way this is going to look good on the computer. And when I brought it into the computer, I was like, I should have shot more in 12,800. It's not free of grain, but how clean it is at 12,800 is remarkable. Yeah. And at 1600, 3200, spot, like it's great. Which is really helpful because you got a zoom lens here, which is at f4. You need all the light you can get. So, I mean, when you're doing editorial, fashion, commercial work, f4 is fine because you can bring in a ton of light. But if you're out in the street, obviously that's a bit tricky. So it was really amazing to see that at 6400, that you're getting a very usable image right out of the box without having to do any grain reduction or anything like that. So, yeah.
Like I mean, for the most part, that was the lens I used for my entire shoot, was this 32 to 64, right, which I thought was a great lens in the studio. And then I switched over to the 120 macro and did some portraits, which I thought was beautiful. I was able to get it nice and tight on the face. And as far as pixel peeping goes, well, when you magnify that image at 100%, it just blows your mind compared to a standard 35mm sensor. So right, it's going to blow you away when you see it, you know.
So what I really like about this is, first off, the screen is really cool. You know, if you're talking about, you know, regular medium format, you know, the prism, you know, if you're shot medium format film, you know, you're used to having the little, you know, prism like on a Rolleiflex or Mamiya, something like that. So you got this. You can also do sort of sideways like that.
Do that.
Yeah, which is really cool. So you can like do that for portrait mode, which is really great. But then they came up with this really cool thing, which I used a lot. So you get this little adapter, and it's like a hot shoe adapter. And then that slides on. And now you've got your eyepiece does this as well, so you can block out the light, which is really, really great. And then it swivels. So then if you want to do portrait, if you're like left or right, you know, it's pretty intelligent.
Yeah, it's really designed ingeniously.
So
it's
like
great.
whereas with the Hasselblad, I mean, you're basically just kind of, you know, point and shoot kind of thing.
Yeah, and we don't have a tilt-up screen on that at all.
Yeah,
So
like this feels like
it was all thought out really well. Yeah.
classic Fuji, where you're like thinking about how people are actually going to use this camera. So in terms of a medium format that is built like for medium format shooters, but still compact, this kind of feels like it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and actually another point that you bring up is if somebody does shoot a lot of verticals, there is a vertical grip that's available for this, and that actually makes it feel even more comfortable in your hand.
Yeah.
So.
And speaking of batteries as well, like that's sort of what brought it up for me was the batteries lasted all night long in that -10. I had the 2 batteries in there, and I didn't even drain 1 battery. Like I think I lost about, I think I went through 75% of 1 battery.
Yeah, and I went through my entire fashion / rock and roll shoot, and I didn't have any issues with the battery. It just kept going. So,
yeah, which is
great.
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Final thoughts.
Well, I think we've got another winner on our hands. I think they're going to bring medium format back to the average consumer that is looking to get into this, and I feel personally that this camera is going to appeal to the studio commercial photographer. But I also feel very strongly that this is going to be a great camera for landscape photography and fine artwork. So I think it's going to have mass appeal to the person that wants to get out and shoot nature and landscapes, and it's going to have amazing image quality, and it's going to really bring medium format back to those shooters.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's kind of unleashing a new love for photography. You know, we're going into a new era of photography with cameras like this, and I think it totally lives up to the hype, and it's gonna be a game changer for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I had medium format and had 35mm. Whenever I wanted the very, very best image quality, it was taking out my medium format camera and shooting with it. And I think the same holds true today, but we've now gotten into that realm where it's affordable again for everybody.
Yeah.